Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. We're going to tackle a topic that, honestly, so many of us grapple with literally every single day, yet we rarely understand what's actually happening at a deeper level. Today, we are decoding the surprising psychological truth behind why we constantly try to keep others happy. We're talking about people-pleasing, but as you'll see, we are looking at it through a completely different lens. The source material we're analyzing today, which is this really comprehensive guide to self-discovery and mental framing, it actually categorizes people-pleasing not just as some quirky personality trait, but as a profound cognitive error. So let's jump right in and unpack what's really going on inside our minds.
I want to start off by asking you a really direct question, and I want you to answer this honestly in your own head. Do you say yes when you actually mean no? Think about it. How often do you agree to take on an extra project, or go to an event, or do a favor while your internal voice is just screaming, absolutely not? It's such a common experience, but it holds a mirror up to a much deeper psychological mechanism. If you find yourself doing this regularly, you are definitely not alone. You'll probably recognize a few of these common symptoms in your own life. Routinely changing your opinions just to match the group, or deferring to others to avoid a fight. Or maybe you feel incredibly responsible when someone else is in a bad mood, or maybe you're just completely suppressing your own needs to smooth things over. Now, on the surface, society totally rewards this stuff. We get called easygoing, or flexible, or just plain nice. But we are going to look way past that surface level assumption today. We're peeling back the layers to see the actual engine driving this behavior.
All right, moving into Section 1, more than a quirk.
So we have to move beyond this idea that people-pleasing is just a harmless, built-in personality trait or some measure of how good of a person you are. In fact, we are shattering a massive societal illusion right here. The myth tells us that people-pleasing is just an exaggerated form of kindness, right? Like it's just an abundance of politeness. But the reality is actually pretty stark. The text explicitly defines people-pleasing as a fear-based cognitive distortion. Sure, it masquerades as a virtue, but it's deeply mechanical. It's really driven by fear, by shame, and by this desperate desire to control outcomes by managing the emotions of the people around us.
That brings us to Section 2, a relational thinking error.
The source material actually uses a specific clinical framework to categorize this behavior. It calls it a relational thinking error. And what that means is it's a faulty pattern of thought arising from emotional dependency, unresolved trauma, or unhealthy relationship dynamics. Okay, let's dive into this for a second. When we talk about cognitive errors, we usually think about things like catastrophizing, right, or black and white thinking. But relational thinking errors happen specifically in the space between you and another person. You attach your identity and your emotional well-being to someone else's mood. You think you're being virtuous, but really, you're trapped in an unhealthy dynamic that's born from emotional dependency. And look, these errors come with a massive cost. They fundamentally distort your entire understanding of love, responsibility, and personal worth. Left unexamined, this distortion totally warps your sense of self. You literally start to believe that your only worth comes from how useful or accommodating you are to other people. You take on responsibilities that aren't even yours, like trying to fix someone else's anger or sadness, and you completely lose sight of what real, unconditional love actually looks like. It is just an incredibly exhausting cycle to be trapped in.
Let's rewind a bit and see where this starts in Section 3, roots in the past.
So, where does this actually come from? Because nobody is born a people pleaser. Let's walk through the psychological timeline here. Step 1, it frequently emerges in people who were raised in chaotic or emotionally inconsistent environments. As a kid, you're a blank slate just trying to survive. So step 2, you learn to survive by managing the emotions of others. You become an absolute expert at reading nonverbal cues, avoiding conflict, and making yourself indispensable just to keep the peace. And honestly, it was a brilliant childhood survival mechanism. It kept you safe. But then we hit step 3. You grow up, and that survival habit becomes an exhausting adult liability. You're still reading the room and managing everyone's moods, but now it's costing you your autonomy.
I really want you to absorb this concept from the text. Relational thinking errors are not your fault, but they are your responsibility to heal. This is so crucial. We absolutely have to destigmatize this behavior right now. That chaotic environment you grew up in, those survival mechanisms you had to adopt to get by, that was not your fault. You did exactly what you had to do. But as an adult, holding on to the power to change your future means you have to take responsibility for your healing.
This leads us right into Section 4, the illusion of safety. Now we're shifting our focus to the hidden engine. the thing keeping this whole machine running day in and day out. The false, deep-seated belief driving this entire distortion is this idea: you must earn love and safety by keeping others happy. When this belief is basically running your operating system, love becomes highly conditional. It's something you literally have to perform for. You believe that if you slip up, if you express a dissenting opinion, or heaven forbid you say no, that love and safety are going to be instantly revoked. It's an illusion, for sure, but man, it feels incredibly real when you're in it. There is a massive gap between the words we use to justify this behavior and the stark reality of what it's actually doing to us. We call it harmony, right? But look at the actual cost. We use conflict avoidance thinking it keeps the peace, but the reality? It creates way more tension because all those problems just go unspoken. We rely on guilt-based morality, making our decisions based on avoiding disapproval, but the reality is we completely lose touch with our own values. We engage in codependency, thinking we're being so helpful, but in reality, we are sacrificing our own health and integrity to try and fix someone else. That harmony? It's entirely fake.
To really map this out, the source text uses the cognitive triangle. And just look how these dots connect. It starts with a distorted thought: I must earn love. Well, that thought immediately triggers an anxious feeling, fear of rejection. And that overwhelming feeling drives the self-sabotaging behavior, agreeing to something you absolutely hate. By understanding this triangle, you can see exactly how a fleeting thought turns into a real-world action. And more importantly, it shows you exactly where you can step in and interrupt the cycle.
So let's talk about how to do that in Section 5, Honesty Over Performance. All right, how do we actually interrupt it? We've got a really practical toolkit here from the source on how to dismantle this error. Step 1, you have to recognize when your actions are being driven by fear rather than your actual values. Take a pause and ask yourself why you're doing something. Step 2, practice setting firm boundaries. And remember, a boundary isn't there to control someone else, it is there to protect you. Step 3, allow others to have their own emotions. If someone is upset, let them be upset. It's not an emergency that you have to fix. And finally, stop taking responsibility for keeping everyone happy. You are simply not that powerful, and frankly, it was never your job to begin with. Let's just contrast these two ways of moving through the world. A life of performance is driven by fear, emotional dependency, and this constant need to control outcomes and other people's opinions. But a life of authenticity? That's driven by your values, by clarity, truth, and peace. Think about the energy difference there. Performance is so exhausting because you're constantly swapping out masks. Authenticity is liberating because you finally drop that heavy illusion of control and just get to exist exactly as you are.
And that brings us to this incredibly powerful realization from the text. Real love and connection require honesty, not performance. Think about it. If you are constantly performing, the love you're receiving is for the performance. It's not actually for you. You deserve connection simply because you exist. Unconditional love isn't something you have to earn by being perfectly accommodating. It's something that happens when two people are brave enough to just be deeply, honestly themselves.
I want to leave you today with a final, lingering provocation to really chew on. Who are you when you stop performing? Seriously, if you put down the massive burden of managing everyone else's emotions, what's left? I know it's a terrifying question if you've been a people pleaser your whole life, but it is also the most exciting question you can ever ask yourself. It is literally the beginning of uncovering your true identity. I highly encourage you to reflect on that today. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this deep dive into the mechanics of our minds has sparked some profound curiosity for you. Keep exploring and keep learning.